McLean. Dick Coach's Corner.
You're listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast with your host, Andy Plimer,
For someone to explain.
bringing you up-to-date coaching concepts from the world of rugby,
The distinction between these mandatory
sharing ideas to make the game better.
All right, welcome to episode number 33 of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. I'm your host, Andy Plimer, and joining me today is Nathan Parnham. Nathan is a Sydney-based strength and conditioning coach whose goal is to inspire others to achieve their personal best. He's the Director of Strength and Conditioning at Newington College in Sydney, which is a member of the GPS, and oversees the senior rugby program there, with all their strength needs, among other roles with the school. He wants to positively impact his athletes' lives every day that he goes into work, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show, Nathan, so welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much, Andy. I appreciate your time and listening to what I've got to say.
Yeah, no worries. Great to have you on. And we were just talking off air there. You've been doing the podcast circuit. You did Historic Perform with James Darley, and then you hit the big leagues with Iron Game Chalk Talk with Ron McKeefery. So you must be a pro at this now.
I don't know if I'm a pro, but I'm just fortunate that I have guys like you who feel that I've got an opinion that's valued. So, mate, I appreciate your time in reaching out to me. And, you've had a lot of, big coaches and things like that on the podcast, and the things that you're doing for rugby, I think is great. And to, throw it out to the development or grassroots level, I think is even better. So more than happy to share what I can and contribute, and hopefully coaches will be able to relate in the process.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for that. And yeah, I've got no doubt they do. So they will. So just a bit of your backstory. How did you get into your role? Kind of, growing up, sports played. Kind of, what was your education pathway to get into this, and a bit of the work experience that led to your current role at Newington?
Yeah, sure. So I started out like most of the, S&C guys going around. We all played sport at a decent level when we were younger, and I was from a big tennis family.
Yeah.
Played competitive tennis when I was through the juniors, and ended up getting a little bit of an injury, and then basically just kind of led the life of a teenager really. And then from that ended up training in Muay Thai. So I've mentioned before that I had a brother. He's got a pretty successful Muay Thai gym at the moment as well, where I'm fortunate enough to work with a few fighters.
Sweet.
And yeah, from there, man, that sort of fueled the passion. And following on from that, I did my undergraduate degree and graduated from that in 2003. And then I did a diploma in education in 2004, which has left me in good stead for being in positions like this.
Yep.
And then took it a little bit further and did my master's in strength and conditioning through Edith Cowan University, and graduated from that in 2010. So it's been a bit of a long journey, and like a lot of other S&C coaches, I worked as a personal trainer on the way through, and put my hand up and did a lot of voluntary sweat hours in various clubs and things like that, across a variety of different sports as well. So one thing that I made sure that everyone wants to work in team sports, and the reality of it is those sports are pretty limited as far as the capacity to get employment. So I certainly threw myself around there in a variety of different sports, and individual sports as well, like tennis. So I did a variety of roles in that capacity, and then one thing led to another, and then eventually I secured a full-time role at Westfield Sports High, and they looked at my diploma in education favourably, that I understood the education system and how everything works.
Yep.
And so that's where that took off, and I was very fortunate that I kind of had a blank canvas to paint what I wanted and where I saw it fit at Westfield Sports High, and worked with many talented coaches there. And from that, I was able to kind of experiment and see a good model of what I thought worked, and it really opened my eyes to the different coaching philosophies across different sports, because I was working with sports like netball, basketball, rugby league, football there, and that really kind of showed me that culturally different sports are aligned and have different philosophies in S&C. So so that's led me to where I am now basically, and I'm at Newington College, as you pointed out, and the sports, there's a variety of different sports here as well, which are a little bit more different to where I was at before. So personally, myself, I'm responsible for a team of 5 casual S&C coaches, and
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate that they're really talented coaches, and we're in a position now whereby I'm not the one who's controlling everything. I oversee it, and I lead these guys into trying to let their careers prosper in that way and apply their trade. So as far as my actual direct contact with specific sports at the moment, I look after the rugby side of things, and I'm also looking after tennis at present. And the other guys are looking after the other sports.
Yeah, so your day-to-day routine is a lot of facilitation with your strength coaches, but probably some backroom planning as well. But then you get in rugby season and tennis season, get to work hands-on with the athletes as well.
Yeah, that's right. So when I first came on board, in all fairness to the other guys, they were responsible for rolling out every program that I created, and then
Right.
I think anyone who is gets appointed in a particular role likes things done a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that came with recruiting of staff as well. So kudos to them, because basically for the first year of being here, those guys rolled out every program that I created, and progressed or regressed it accordingly and used their skill set to do so. But they were the ones who actually just rolled it out as it was planned, and then as times evolved, they've taken on more responsibility, and guys have looked after. So there's a head of basketball and things like that, and so that's how I've done it, and it's been more about just making sure that everyone was on the same page with our coaching method and philosophy, and it's just strengthened my strength and conditioning department because of it.
Oh, great. Okay. So listening to your interview on Historic Perform podcast, and any listeners out there should track that down, because it's a great podcast and some really good nuggets in there. You talked a lot about how Newington's strength and conditioning programs from grade 7 up to grade 12 fits quite nicely with the LTAD, and how that you'll progressively develop an athlete following that model. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, for example, if a grade 7 kid, 12 years old, what's the kind of pathway he'd go through until he gets to grade 12 and is an 18-year-old ready to graduate high school and move forward?
Yeah, sure. So I think first and foremost, most of the people who are aware of in development programs and so forth, I think there's a difference between the scientific literature and different models that have come through, which certainly have their merit. And I definitely take dribs and drabs from all of them. The challenge with it is, I think that as a strength and conditioning practitioner, you have to see where that fits in your environment. And what I mean by that is, you may not necessarily follow, the LTAD model specifically, and it's up to you how you implement that and how it fits into your environment. So I'll give you an example of that. Is you're right. So from year 7, we get guys into the gym as early as possible, and they're still essentially, if you follow the traditional LTAD model, they're in that learning to train stage.
Yep.
And all this is about is really trying to get the guys familiar with the basic fundamentals of training. So these are things that often experienced coaches overlook when they come into a development program, because let's face it, a 12-year-old's attention span is very limited. So when they're in a gym, it's they're often having a conversation, and next thing they're over the other side of the gym, and it's just trying to develop and instill those values of you guys actually spotting your partner, being there for him, giving him feedback and things like that. And while these might appear simple and things that most people in an elite thing don't really focus on, it's something that certainly gets overlooked. So we just work on core stability stuff, just trying to lay the foundations with their fundamental movement patterns in year 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that, we're really big on trying to develop a holistic approach with the athlete. And when I say athlete, that can be the general students and the overall general population students within the school as well. So focusing on things like muscular imbalances, range of movement, hip stability, and all those sort of things. So that's at the very basic level. Everything stems from that. So then the guys who are in year 8, they be 13, 14 years of age. then they go through into more the fundamental movement patterns, but with a little bit more load. So, and we introduce them, one by one. We try and feed through the different pieces of equipment that are in the gym, because at the end of the day, I don't want a student just laying on the ground doing everything the whole time, because they're not going to come back. So in order for us to get the buy-in from those guys, we have to, get them on the medicine balls. We have to get them on the Swiss balls and things like that. And if we continue to challenge them that way, but provided that we keep the programming or the simplicity of the programming with our goal and objective of trying to train those fundamental movement skills, then it's a win-win for both parties. So that's how that works into year 8. The year 9 guys who are getting around that 15 years of age, hopefully they've kind of progressed and that, they're in that position where they can hold their own body weight and so forth, whether that be unilaterally, bilaterally, across a variety of different planes. And then from there, that's where we start to get into the crux of a little bit more of the funkier exercises that most teenage boys want to do. And then that kind of appeases them and gets that buy-in in that way. And then once we're confident with that, then it's a matter of us being able to actually get them in a safe environment and educate them accordingly, that it's not all about, stacking up the bench press and doing as much as you can. There's other things in there like tempo, repetitions, recovery, or interset recoveries and things like that, where they've progressed into that training to train stage, and these things are still being emphasized. And then from there, it goes into the year 10. So year 10, to give you an example, is, 15, 16-year-old students, and, they've got a little bit more lean muscle mass by that stage. And whilst they're still developing, and there's certain things like their shoulders and spine and things like that need to be taken into consideration, this is where we get them into a little bit more of the progressive movement stages. So I call it a critical window period, where we'll commit a whole term to. So the terms there's 4 schooling terms, and they're split up into 2 4-week mesocycles.
Yep.
And what will happen in those is that in term 1 there'll be 2 mesocycles that are more tailored towards the hypertrophy based or the tissue development side of things.
Yep.
And then we go into term 2, which is more strength development. So they will start at the higher repetition range and then progress to lower repetition range. And then from that, we go into term 3 is a really important term, because that's where we teach them the Olympic lifting progressions. And, we don't get too funky with that during the initial stages, because it's up to us to make sure that they have the necessary movement patterns like correct hip hinging and all the rest of it prior to prior to advancing those exercises, so that they have that framework there. And then when they're in year 11 and 12, we build on that. We don't have to waste time with a simple thing. So term 4 kind of starts off over again, because in term 4, they roll into the summer programs, and depending on where they're at, it's kind of still about building those physical capacities going into the senior age groups.
Yeah.
The senior age groups, what I refer to is year 11 and 12. So you're dealing with guys who are 16, turning 17, and then even 18 years of age in year 12. And then from there, the exercises just get more advanced and with a little bit more load. So that's to kind of summarize the overall program of it. We're now in a position where we're reviewing our programs, and we traditionally went down that model where if it was say, for example, a hypertrophy-based session, that they, focus heavily on, multiple lifts for the same muscle group, etc. And we've realised that that wasn't as successful as it probably could have been. So what we've done now is we definitely do full body workouts, but the other thing that we're trying to do is develop the overall athletic qualities for all the students, not just not the elite sports people at the college, but those who are, aspiring athletes to pursue sport as a career outside of it. What we're doing now is trying to develop more their physical literacy of things like catching, passing, the coordination side of things while they're in various body or holding various body positions. Things like dynamic balance or dynamic stability, to do with proprioceptive stuff as well. So these are all things that are included in it, and we've also included an element of energy system development stuff at the back end of it, because the reality of it is a lot of the guys in the gym, the programs are designed to kind of be about a 40-minute program.
Yep.
And boys would hang around in here for an hour if they could. So what we've tried to do is just with a spacing, it's a way that you need to be conscious of that and how many students are in the gym. So we don't want guys hanging around for 75 minutes, 90 minutes doing a gym session. So we get them in there, get them done with, a 40-minute strength-based workout with all those movement qualities I mentioned previously, and then they finish with a bit of energy system development stuff to finish them off. So that's the overall side of it, and so that's where we're sitting at the moment.
Sweet. So you pretty much go from like stage 3 through to the beginnings of stage 5, right? Training to compete with those older kids.
It's the stages that we miss out on is so depending, like I think it's even up to 8 stages now, but ours is the 6-stage model. I know it's advanced a lot now, but the one that we miss out on, so the fundamentals, which is let's just say for example 10 years of age, those are the guys who would be in the Wyvern campus, which is the junior school. Right, so we miss out on that, but we try and phase that into. They enter in the gym basically in the learning to train. So from year 7 through to year 8, they're still in the learning to train phase. Then they go into the training to train phase all the way into year 10. And then in year 11 and 12, the senior teams, that's where they're in the training to compete, which means, that their actual gym-based sessions and their energy system development stuff in the representative teams is periodized according to their competition schedule. So none of the other stuff is specialized. And that's something that, a lot of people talk about that, and it's something that I'm quite passionate about as well, in the fact that specialization is a big thing. And I think that it's up to, the directors of the sport here, for example, to really hone each student's talent and not pigeonhole them into certain playing positions and all the rest of it, and support them across a variety of different sport, or that multi-sport approach that you hear people refer to. And then when they get into year 11 and 12, that's when they're in the training to compete stage. So hopefully when they graduate from here, not only the general students making healthier, lifestyle choices and lifelong choices as well, but the guys who are aspiring to pursue sport as a career, then we've put them in better stead so that they've got the foundations there. And then when we hand them over to different academies that might be under 20s and things like that, then their movement competency is fully literate. They've got limited imbalances, and it's just about trying to build that framework, whether it be their engine, their cardiovascular system, or it be their their lifting capacity. So that's where we see it anyway.
Yeah, well, that's great. And hearing that that non-specialized approach is quite refreshing. Living in North America, it's brutal with hockey. You're hearing like kids 10, 12 years old being referred to as elite hockey players, playing hockey 10 months of the year. It's pretty crazy. So it's refreshing to hear that other side of the story.
Yeah, and I think it's forever a challenge, because a lot of people, most coaches who have been around, and particularly in development programs, know that everyone's of a similar philosophy that a multi-sport approach is great. Like as an example, soccer or football is great for tennis because it's footwork and all the rest of it. So it's still coordination, it's still kinesthetic awareness, and it's supportive of it. But then again, you also have those conversations with coaches who you say to them, right, so we're going to support this student, and in that multi-sport thing, and then they'll nod their head and say, yeah, we're multi-sport supportive, but they've got to be doing this. And it's like, well, you've just nodded your head when I've said it, and now you're telling me that it's got to be specialised. Yeah. So, but mate, that's an ongoing battle, and I think it's something that a lot of development coaches can relate to, not only S&C coaches, but guys who are trying to, fight the good fight and just try and build a better individual.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, moving forward, like moving on to like the senior team at Newington that you oversee. You emailed me a great video that you guys put together of what you're doing in the weight room with them, and it's as professional as a setup you can imagine for a high school. It's great, and I'll put that up on my website so people can check it out. But with that senior team, what's the pre-season and in-season week look like for those athletes?
Yeah, sure. So what happens in that scenario is the biggest challenge that we have is the transition between summer and winter sport. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example, and this happens every year, is the rowing guys are fantastic at building a really great engine. And then the challenge that is when they transition into the rugby side of things, with the change of direction and acceleration, deceleration, and all those sort of things, they might appear really, really simple. And I know sometimes the students might get frustrated in it, that they feel that, they can be, I don't like using the term flogged, but, that their engine enables them to do that. But unfortunately, their peripheral, structures don't. So it's up to us to take ownership of that. So what I generally do, to give you a bit of an overview, from January for us, January to March is a bit of a, I don't want to say a pre-season, but that's where we do general prep stuff. So most of the boys are encouraged to come into the gym, and we're just looking at, more of the hypertrophy-based stuff, looking at their mobility, because we have a lot of big lads here who it's really important for us that we're not about trying to just get the biggest boys that we can to fill the rugby field. The big guys need to be able to move, and they need to be competent in that and get themselves in certain positions, which is what you see in that video that you're talking about. It's very movement oriented.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's what we try and instill. So we try and do that stuff early so that they're fully competent unilaterally, bilaterally, in their, acceleration, deceleration, those sort of things. And that's another thing as well that we do, is we focus on the deceleration side of things early, and the change of direction things, so that they can absorb the force and everything like that. And their groins or hamstrings and knees aren't going because of the fact that they haven't been or pre-exposed to those sort of movements. So that'll generally involve 2 to 3 gym sessions a week. We don't do any back squatting as much as, this is a continual thing as well. During the early stages, we don't. So, for example, in that first term, they don't do any back squatting. It's more about trying to get the guys in front squatting positions and trying to overload them in different squatting positions, whereby we're not continually just doing axial loading all year round. As much as the boys love their squatting and things, it's more up to us as our, for being professionals and using our coaching eye to challenge them in a variety of different movement planes with a variety of different pieces of equipment, from kettlebells to bands and cables and things like that, so that as we get a little bit closer to the season, when they progress into their strength-based stuff, then that's where we start loading them up a little bit more as well. So that's the pre-season side of it.
When you talk about no squatting, or you don't squat early, the rowers, if you're using that as an example, they'd be pretty dominant in their anterior chain, right? So they probably need more posterior work. Their posterior chain would be dominant. They need more anterior chain work, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, but the challenge for that is that, say the rowing guys themselves culturally have, it's a different sport, and they culturally have their beliefs about, strength and what strength is and where they see it. So, as an example, our guys are doing things on the leg press and stuff like that with the rowing center. So, whilst we might sit here and say, oh, well, they should be squatting this, squatting that, and if they're in season for rowing, and, from an external party, if you're a coach looking in, you'd be kind of looking at it going, well, what do you mean you don't back squat? You're already talking about guys being in season for rowing. Surely they're back squatting in season for rowing. But the reality of it is, from our perspective, is they're not. And that's the rowing guy's decision to do that. And then in which case is fine. And like I said, that's culturally their sport. So what we do with those guys is how we look at, because they, they enter in a far better position than, say, for example, someone, there's no one who plays tennis and rugby in the first 15 anyway, but if they did, then, that would be a completely different specimen as well. So it's how we utilize our knowledge in the individual students and how we're going to go from that. So another challenging thing for us is we have a 16s development lifting group, which takes place when they're in year 10. So the guys who are in the 16 A's and B's rugby team, that they do 1 session a week. And all that is or just working on, that's not lifting heavy at all. That's going through the movement, teaching them different postures, teaching them Olympic lifting variations and so forth, so that when they come in, because previously what happened was you'd have students who come in from year 10, they've never done a back squat before if they've never been encouraged to come into the gym, and then all of a sudden you've got guys in year 12 who think that they're going to be lifting the house down, and that's a dangerous position to be in, because in order to get buy-in from the younger guys, they lose face if we say, well, you can't squat because of this, and then they want to be part of the big time as well. So it's up to us to try and be as creative as we can with our programming to try and get the buy-in from the boys early,
Yeah.
and also just produce a better rounded athlete. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. And in season, so how's in season look when they're actually in GPS and then competing?
Yeah, so in season is from April through to September. So the pre-season, or what I mentioned earlier on, they'll be lifting anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week, and in season they're only lifting 2 sessions a week. And
Yep.
in some weeks, if it's depending on how they're feeling, it might only be 1 session a week. So how it differs is that what we do in season, we focus in general. It's a lot more strength and power based,
Yep.
and that's where we try and focus on the progressing the plyometric side of things as well. How we generally do it is we split them up. I'll go into a typical session a little bit later, but that's how that works as far as with the in-season side of it. Earlier on in season, we also spend a bit more time with the energy system development stuff, so the conditioning side of it as well. So the challenge with working in a schoolboy environment is you've got to actually be conscious of a variety of different things going on in the school at the one time, and full credit to our rugby director, because he's learned along the way as well as much as I have too, in that we need to create a program of best rather than what I call a best program, because it's very easy to sit back if your passion is rugby and you were the director of rugby and say, okay, we need to target X, Y, and Z qualities, but then we've both learned along the way that sometimes the most successful programs that we've created have been more that we've just prioritized and created, a program of best fit for the environment, and that's how we get the outcomes that we have. So, did you want me to go into a typical session of how it kind of runs?
Yeah, let's do that. And like you talked about, how you group the players in the gym and some of the benefits you get out of that as well. That'd be great.
Okay, so just as a sample, gym-based session. So what we do is so when they come to the gym, they have to be there at a specific time, and we try and set the standards early, because I know a lot of coaches and things like that might say, oh, well, there's no championship that's won in the gym. But the reality of it is culture is established in the gym, and it's up to us to establish that early. And that follows suit throughout the whole program. So what we do is we break them into 3 groups for their first warm-up, which is 10 minutes. And in those 3 groups, we try and establish a leader. So what it is the groups will be a mobility group, there'll be an activation type group, and there'll be a gymnastic progression type group.
Okay.
And they've got a certain number of exercises to get through. It's just done on a timing system where they go for 40 seconds, they get 20 seconds to change, and then they go through a couple of exercises and then rotate around. So in that 10-minute period, they're already targeting mobility, activation, and gymnastics progressions. The gymnastics progressions were introduced this year because there's a lot of boys who we just thought couldn't move, and they moved really poorly. So things like forward rolls, side rolls, and getting them into different positions, that's included in the warm-up. And we found that dynamic nature of it has certainly helped us out. So that goes for 10 minutes, that's done. Then they get split into different groups whereby, depending on what we're trying to get out of the individual athlete, it's a little bit different to if you were working in say, for example, a professional realm where you might get, tight 5 together with back row half 5/8. And then outside backs as a group. We don't group them necessarily like that. We might have the forwards focusing on a bit more strength emphasis than the backs at any one time. And the backs might be working on a little bit more explosive activities. And we've got a third group in there as well who we call the engine room.
Yep.
And basically what happens there is we try and get the engine room to the boys to celebrate the engine room, whereby we see these individuals as the ones where the backs get the glory from it. So what I mean by that is we didn't do it so much this year, which, I think we could have done better. And we've done it the 2 previous years. Is one gripe that I have, and I know we sort of spoke about this, is if you work in a development program and you're labeling kids to be in a fat club or a fat group, then as far as I'm concerned, it's not acceptable, because it's not motivating or inspiring anyone. And teenage boys and all the rest of it have body issues and things. And I just think by shaming individuals like that, you need to sort of have a little bit of a hard look at yourself and the environment that you work in. I don't actually do it with senior guys even, but at the same time, what we do instead is it's called the engine room, where these guys are celebrated because they're the ones who are busting their gut for the backs to get the glory and, shift it out and score the tries, etc. And so what we do at the beginning of the season then is more introduce the boys and celebrate that, these guys are in the engine room, and rather than doing 2 strength-based sessions, what they'll do is they might do a strength-based session earlier on in the week with some of the other forwards, but then their second gym session will be a Metcon session. And we do it that way. So the other thing is as well, saying that a student is overweight or calling him fat and then expecting him to be inspired to sit on a bike to lose weight is probably not the best approach.
No, it's not going to happen.
No. So what we do is, the engine room, the boys will be doing Metcon stuff. So we make it really specific, and, they're carrying things and, getting themselves into certain body positions, and that way we get the best out of them. And the other boys also celebrate that too. So it just really instills that cultural framework within the gym setting. So earlier on so that's how that works. And that goes for about, say, if it's just a gym-based session, a gym session will go for about 40 minutes, excluding the 10-minute warm-up.
Yep.
Then I'll spend about 10 minutes stretching.
Yep.
At the end is a team stretch, and we try and encourage leaders to lead that early on in the season and prior. So when we're going through our trials, say, and maybe just slightly into the season, the first 1 or 2 rounds, the biggest thing that we learned was, rather than getting the boys to come in on separate mornings and do conditioning, what we do is we cut the gym sessions a little bit short. So it might be the 10-minute warm-up. They might do 30 to 40 maximum minutes in the gym. And then we spend the last 20 minutes doing energy system or conditioning-based drills. So we do a 30-15 IFT test, and that's to establish, what group they're in. And then we progress it accordingly. So it starts off linear conditioning, a little bit lower intensity, and then we progress as the season approaches to get multiple changes of direction in there too. So I know if you look at the scientific literature, and some people from an outsider's perspective would look at it and go, you're mad doing a gym session and then going out and doing running and conditioning based stuff immediately straight after. But the challenge of it is, like I said to you, the best benefits that we've had is, rather than bringing those boys in to do 2 conditioning sessions on a morning a week, they get to sleep in those 2 mornings. And what's better, they get recovery, they get sleep in, as opposed to, bringing them in for 5 mornings a week. And that's what I was referring to, that program of Best Fit.
Yeah.
That's how we do that. So that's worked. That's probably been the best thing that we've kind of implemented in the last 2 years.
And then you just manage the load at the back end.
Yeah, that's right. And then the positive to it too, another thing that people, will question and things like that, people always talk about, what do you do for hamstring injuries, this or that? And to be honest, when you're working in an environment like this, the students are very malleable in the fact that they don't have the maturation that you will with, an early 20s or late 20-year-old rugby player with a history of hamstring strains and all the rest of it. So if we get the boys moving better, and trying to target different things as well. So we do try and target hamstring, glutes and hip stability and all the rest of it. But the boys are very resilient in what they can do, and it's up to us to try and use our coaching eye to roll the conditioning program out accordingly based on that. So that's the overall scope of what a general session would look like.
Yeah, awesome. And we spoke also, you've got a few contracted players in the group who are probably linked with the Waratahs or with various academies, maybe NRC or something like that. How do you manage those guys in the group with regards to their load?
Yeah, and that's a good point, because of the fact that at the end of the day, when you're working in a schooling environment, I think in the past, I don't think necessarily so much now, but in the past, I think people, in professional outfits and stuff probably thought that the schooling system was it's just a school type scenario when it came to their athletic development. But, as we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of the schools are, there's guys like myself in there who, have an understanding of how to develop the qualities of an athlete. And so how it works, to answer your question, the guys have been great, using the Waratahs as an example. Their under 20s guy, he's a fantastic guy, Aaron Scully, who he has come out and introduced himself and just opened up that communication channel. And the same thing happens with, the various other codes as well. And so how it works in Newington is there's actually what's called a talented sporting program, where students such as those guys who have been flagged by different, clubs and things like that. They're part of this program, and there's a director in the talent and sporting program who he has a meeting with these students fortnightly where they sit down and discuss how they're coping with different things, and he might flag it with a director of sport, say for example the director of rugby, and say this student's got a few things going on at the moment, and then the director of rugby and I will also communicate, and they'll just say, look, I'm happy for so and so to sit this session out. In saying that, in sitting the session out, it's got to be reinforced that they're still around the boys. So, they might come in and they might just do a stretch session or something like that. I think where we've come unstuck in the past is where in those instances where students have been, told, oh, you don't have to train on this particular morning or whatever, then sometimes that just creates a little bit of disharmony in the group because people think that they're being, given special treatment or a bit of favoritism or whatever. But for us, we know that to build a culture, we need to try and get all the boys there. So that's how we monitor the load of them. The boys, people ask me as far as what loading systems do you have in place to monitor it and all the rest of it. And like I said, it's nothing scientific in that regard, but it's very much we've got to a stage now where we know what a big week is, and we also know what a kind of a smaller, or lesser volume or intensity-based week is. And the thing is, we also know is that regardless of how much I periodize things, as much as I like, I can have it done to a T, but then something will come up. There might be a drama performance. There might be, exams for year 10 one week, exams for year 11 another, etc., or trial exams for year 12 guys, whatever it is. There's always something going on in a school like this. And as much as I like to, I do periodize it. I do sit down and, I try and have my targets we're trying to, develop, or physical qualities we're trying to develop. There's always something that comes up that kind of interrupts that, and it's how you respond to that. So, in regards to those players being monitored, it's more about the communication lines being open, and it's also about the boys taking ownership of it, rather than thinking that, they're trying to cop out of doing something. It's certainly not that. It's more a matter of how they're managed holistically. And that's all facets of their life as well.
Yeah, and it's probably a big relationship piece in there too between the strength coach and the athletes, and the director of rugby and the athletes as well.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's why, like I said before, we've got a director of rugby here who's fantastic in keeping the communication lines open. And if I flag something or he flags something, it's never an egotistical thing of, well, I want to do this and you need to do that. I think that one of the biggest strengths in working in a schooling or a development program is that it's not so cutthroat in the fact that, say, for example, the director of rugby is not worried about losing his house, that his job's on the line as a professional coach would, where, at the end of the day, he gets the final say, and it's up to the performance staff to kind of agree and then find a way of how they can go into kind of program of best fit model. And I just think that I'm blessed in that regards, that any S&C coach who works in a development program, you're in a fearless environment where you can experiment and also first and foremost just have the students' best interest at heart, without being fearful of failure.
Yeah, great. All right, so you've been there almost 5 years. There've got to be some pretty big learning points in that time. What have some have been some of those key areas?
Yeah, so I think I touched on it before, as far as certainly trying to overload the boys and everyone trying to run their own show has been a big learning experience. So valuing, and I know it sounds like a soft option to some people who might be listening, talking about sleep and all those sort of things. But for us, we've just found bang for buck, that plays a key role. Another thing that we've kind of learned along the process is the cultural thing, as I've mentioned, plays a big role, and it's up to us both in the gym and also out on the field to collaboratively work together and hold up those values and instill those in the boys. We can't be, tough as nails in the gym and getting up them for uniform things or whatever, and then the coaches being relaxed on the field, or the boys coming to the gym and mucking around, and then that translates onto the field. So culturally, we have to respect the process of that. Another thing that we've certainly learned along the way is just looking, I know, like we said about the specialisation side of things, it's more a matter of having the directors work together and not in silos where they say, well, this is my time now and your time's going to come when summer rolls around or when winter rolls around. And that's part of the challenge in my role, is that I've got to get these guys communicating together. And that's something that we certainly have learnt, that all the directors need to put their egos to the side, and first and foremost, it's about what's best for the students. So that's one thing. Another thing that we've tried to learn, or we have learnt, sorry, not tried to learn, is, and this is from a coaching perspective as well as the S&C side of things, is this has to be reviewed every year. And that I think we had a lot of talent for a few years, and I think the coaches would acknowledge this as well, in the fact that you can't play the same style of footy that you might be able to play with certain cattle, as opposed to formies and all the rest of it. And it's the same as the S&C side of things. You can't get students doing certain things. If you've got a group of fast, explosive guys one year that are running all over the park, and then the next year guys are slower and whatnot, it's how you adapt our programming accordingly, and it's also how the coaches adapt their playing style accordingly. So that would be a massive one. And yeah, I think that, like I said, the engine room before is a big one, because that's something that we've got, culturally a really, really strong vibe from in the past with that team cohesion. And that's something that, like I said, is imperative.
Great. All right. Last question till we go to our final four questions. What advice would you give coaches who are just kind of starting working with that, developing athletes in strength and conditioning? They may be, like you said, they might come from an elite background and have started working with them, or they might be, an ex-player who's used to doing X, Y, and Z in the weight room. What would be some advice you'd give those coaches who are just getting to know the development kind of pathway?
I think you have to respect the process. And what I mean by that is it's very easy for an ex-professional player to come into an environment and say, and start throwing all the funky moves out and, exercises and all the rest of it, which in due course and with respect, they've earned the right to do that over their career, but it's probably the last thing that they remember. So what I mean by that is they kind of block out what they learnt through those development years and want to get into the program and say, well, we used to do this and let's get into this. And I think that's the biggest kind of the setup for failure in that regards, is you have to respect the process and respect the age group that you're working with. And people always talk about it, saying that they're not mini adults, and they're not, because their bodies aren't developed accordingly. So my advice would be that you need to, as I said, respect the process and regress things and get them to earn the right to progress things, rather than going the other way and starting from the top and then coming out with the wrong desired results. Yeah,
and we were talking earlier before the interview about your work with the U20 Eels rugby league team for non-Southern Hemisphere people, and that you've got guys in there still goblet squatting because they're not ready for a back squat.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's an interesting point as well, because as I mentioned before, you have students in there who have just finished high school, and they may not have been in a fortunate environment where their lifting is a little bit limited. And in comparison to guys who were there the year before who are very experienced. And we had this chat, it's funny you say that, because we had this chat last night, and the fact is that everyone has to be regressed to earn the right to move forward. So you're right. I get these guys doing goblet squats and everything, and the reality of it is that they're young enough, because of the fact that at the moment they're doing a lot more running, and I don't want to get them in that environment where they're going, well, I want to back squat, I want to lift as heavy as I can, and why are we lifting lighter weights and things, when the first session they weren't able to get into a deep squat position and just try and open their hips up. So why am I going to overload you doing a back squat, and then all of a sudden I'm going to get you out on the field and get you, putting the kilometers in your legs, and next thing you're talking about your back's tight, you've got a sore back, and then there's hamstring issues and all the rest of it. So it's one of those things where I think as S&C coaches we're very, we like to get things done a particular way, but I think part of being the best coach that you can be is providing that education to the players and explaining why they're doing it and saying, do you want to be 5% stronger than you were last year, or do you want to be 20% stronger than last year because of the fact that, you're able to get yourself into certain positions and you're able to tolerate more load because you've developed those foundations. And being competitive as they are, athletes are certainly in that realm where they just want to continue to fire, working on all systems. And it's up to the S&C guys to try and pull them back and get them firing when they need to get them firing, rather than I always cringe when someone says, "Oh yeah, they just need to be flogged, so just flog them." And I go, "Well, maybe they don't need to be flogged
maybe
today.
They need the opposite.
Maybe it needs to be a fun day where they do a little bit of game-based conditioning, because tomorrow they're going to get belted."
Yeah.
So, but you can't, you can't flog everyone day in, day out and expect the same results. So it's a matter of how you communicate that with the coaches and so forth.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, we always end the show with the same final 4 questions. When you were a kid growing up, who was your favourite rugby player or favourite athlete that really drew you to a sport?
Drew me to a sport. Well, given that it's rugby, I'll keep it rugby specific.
Sweet.
Yeah, with all due respects, mate, Jerry Collins, and
Oh,
I
nice.
know I'm Australian,
absolutely.
but mate, to be honest, I wasn't a competitive rugby player when I was younger, but every time I used to watch, I just used to think, this is a guy that I'd love to have by my side, because he was rock solid and he was always there. And yeah, mate, I love watching the All Blacks play. Don't tell anyone that, but mate, he was just yeah, mate, I just. Yeah, he he was something, man, that mate, he's rock solid.
He was unreal. Yeah, and one of the best going around for sure. He was. Yeah, all right. Well, definitely we'll give you that one for sure. All right. What about now? You keep an eye on rugby now. Who are some of the favourite players going around now that you like watching play?
At the moment, to be honest, one of the favourite guys I like is David Pocock.
Yeah, absolutely.
The reason for that is I've seen the guy train in the gym, and he has got a relentless work ethic. And not only that, I think I don't know the guy personally, so but you always hear and read things, and I just think that he would be the type of character. He's not afraid to. He's a person of very good character, and he's not afraid to stand up for what he believes in. And I think that's important for any athlete.
Yep.
And I love building character in the younger guys, and I just think for someone to have that relentless work ethic and be not afraid to stand up, I think that's that gets my vote for sure.
Yeah. He's spot on for sure. All right. What about coaches? Who's a high profile coach? Doesn't need to be rugby, but a high profile coach that you admire what they're doing.
Yeah, I've met a lot of great coaches, mate. I don't think I'd be able to single one out, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just think the best coaches are the ones who, they may not necessarily be the most technically gifted.
Yep.
But if you can get a group of blokes together who can believe in each other and stand tall side by side and really get the outcomes based on that. And I think that comes from a personal approach. So I know that coaching's going down that role now where a lot of guys are trying to get a bit more family oriented and all the rest of it. And there's a lot of coaches to name out there who are doing that. And I just think that that's why they're excelling, and they're doing a fantastic job of it in a variety of different sports, not just rugby alone.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and last question: who's coach in the trenches, who's digging away, who doesn't have a profile but deserves recognition?
Yeah, mate, I thought about this one for you because I knew it was going to be asked. And to be honest, I think it's only a fair response in that I've got guys who work with me, and I'd like to give them a shout out.
Yeah.
Glenn Pilcher, who actually rolls out the rugby program with me, because he has far more football brain than what I do, and he's the one who I get up my silly ideas. Matthew Sade, Sean Law, James Walsh, and another fella, Sam Martin, as well. So these guys are all part of my team, and I know that our program wouldn't be as strong without these gentlemen and coaches who've been here for the last 3 to 4 years. So I have to give a shout out for them, mate, because they're very honourable human beings.
Awesome, that's great, and no doubt the boys are lucky to have them around, coaching them and helping them be the best rugby players they can be. So that's an awesome environment that they've got. And sounds like you love your work, and it's been great having you on the show. So I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to have a chat with me.
Thanks very much, mate. I appreciate the time, and I love all the work that you're doing on the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. It's awesome. You've had a lot of special guests on here and some big names as well. And I know it takes a lot of work for guys like you to do this for very little reward. And I just wanted to say thanks, mate, because it's guys like you who progress different industries. So cheers for having me on.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Nathan. All right. Cheers, mate.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode. You can also follow us on Twitter at RugbyCoachSCNR or via the website at therugbycoachescorner.com. Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode. You can also follow us on Twitter at RugbyCoachSCNR or via the website at therugbycoachescorner.com. Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better.